Scientists found sulfur in the ruins of Sodom that is 98% pure. No natural process on Earth produces that. The burn rings in the limestone beneath it indicate temperatures that melt solid stone. The land has been chemically uninhabitable for 4,000 years. This was not a natural disaster. This was a weapon, chosen deliberately, deployed precisely, and the evidence is still in the ground.
Somewhere in the ancient world, there is a place that should not exist. A valley that was once lush, fertile, populated. A plain described in Genesis as looking like the very garden of God. Today, it is nothing. No crops, no settlements, no life. Just white ash formations rising from brown desert earth, still holding the shape of buildings that burned 4,000 years ago. Scientists have studied this place, and what they found in the soil, in the ruins, in the stone itself, is something that geology simply cannot explain. This is the story of Brimstone, and why God chose it as the weapon of final judgment. When archaeologists began excavating the ruins of the cities on the Dead Sea Plain, they found something embedded in the ash layers that stopped them cold. Small spheres, white, powdery, almost crystalline. They collected samples and sent them to the lab. The results came back, 98% pure sulfur. Now, that number needs to stop you for a moment, because here is what you need to understand. Natural sulfur, the kind produced by volcanoes, by geothermal venting, by any known process on Earth, is typically between 40 and 60% pure. It comes out contaminated, mixed with minerals, discolored, yellow and waxy. But these spheres were white, clean, 98%. No natural process on Earth produces that, not one. And they were not sitting on top of the ruins. They were sealed inside the ash, embedded in the walls of buildings that no longer existed as buildings. They had arrived during the destruction itself. Here is something most people don't know about brimstone. It is not just fire. At 239 degrees Fahrenheit, sulfur melts. It does not just burn, it liquefies. It becomes a fluid, dense, slow-moving, glowing yellow gold. And when liquid sulfur hits a surface, it doesn't stay on top of it. It flows. It finds every crack, every joint, every fissure in the stone. It seeps in, and then it ignites from the inside. This is not how normal fire works. Normal fire burns across surfaces. This burned through them. Liquid sulfur does not scorch, it consumes, and it leaves behind a chemical signature that is impossible to mistake for anything natural. Before the fire even reaches you, the gas does. When sulfur burns, it releases sulfur dioxide, SO2. And here is the terrifying thing about sulfur dioxide. It is heavier than air. It does not rise. It sinks. It hugs the ground. It fills every low-lying space, every doorway, every street, every shelter, like an invisible tide coming in. You cannot see it clearly. You cannot outrun it. It suffocates before the flame ever arrives. The ancient world called it the breath of the underworld. And in the biblical account of Sodom and Gomorrah, the instruction given to Lot and his family was simple. Do not stop. Do not look back. Get to high ground. That was not poetry. That was chemistry. The gas settles in the valley. High ground is the only escape from a suffocant that sinks. Most people read the phrase brimstone and fire and picture one thing: an explosion, a fireball, instant destruction. But look more carefully at the text. Brimstone is named first. Fire is named second. That sequencing is not accidental. The sulfur descended before the ignition. The liquid coated the surfaces before the flame arrived. The gas settled in the valley before anyone could react. This was not a single detonation. It was a sequence, a process. Phase 1, the sulfur rains down. Phase 2, it ignites. And by the time Phase 2 begins, there is no stopping it. The substance was designed to make ignition not the beginning of the destruction, but the point of no return. Let's be precise about what was found here. Pick up a piece of sulfur from the slopes of Mount Vesuvius, from the geothermal fields of Iceland, from any volcanic vent anywhere on Earth. It will be yellow, it will be waxy or granular, and it will test between 40 and 60% pure. The rest is contamination, silicates, calcium compounds, iron oxides, the geological fingerprint of the environment that produced it. Now look at what was pulled from the ruins of the Dead Sea Plain. White, powdery, almost crystalline in structure, 98% pure sulfur. Geologists were asked a simple question: what natural process produces this? The answer, after extensive analysis, was equally simple: none. There is no known volcanic environment, no geothermal system, no natural geological process on Earth that produces sulfur at 98% purity. These spheres are a geological impossibility, which means they did not come from the ground. But the sulfur spheres themselves are half the story. Look at the limestone beneath them. Everywhere a sulfur sphere made contact with the stone, there is a ring, a perfect circular mark, scorched onto the surface. Not just on the surface, into it. These burn rings penetrate the limestone, going inward from the point of impact in concentric circles of heat damage. To do this to solid limestone, to burn not across it, but through it, requires sustained temperatures far beyond what any conventional fuel source of the ancient world could generate. Wood burns at roughly 600 degrees Fahrenheit. Oil fires reach around 1700. The burn rings in the limestone at this site indicate contact temperatures far exceeding either of them. The sulfur spheres did this, alone, each one, and they are embedded throughout the ruins like a pattern, like it rained, because it did. Now let's talk about what happens when sulfur burns at extreme temperatures. At roughly 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, a process called thermal ionization occurs. At that temperature, the sulfur compound does not just react with the surrounding material, it strips electrons from it. The stone does not simply crack or char, it restructures at the molecular level. Limestone, which is calcium carbonate, begins to decompose. The calcium and carbon separate. The stone does not just blacken, it literally melts. 5,000 degrees. For context, the surface of the sun is about 10,000 degrees. We are talking about half solar temperatures occurring on the ground, in a valley, in the ancient Near East. And the geological evidence in the ruins shows exactly this kind of thermal event occurred here. The stone did not burn, it melted. There is one more piece to this, one more reason why this specific location, this specific valley, became an inferno that could not be stopped. The Dead Sea Plain was rich in bitumen. The Bible itself calls it out, describing the valley being filled with slime pits, ancient slime, tar,
bitumen, hydrocarbon deposits bubbling up through the rock. When sulfur burning at extreme temperatures makes contact with bitumen, something extraordinary happens. The reaction becomes self-sustaining. The sulfur combustion produces heat. Heat vaporizes the bitumen. Bitumen ignites and feeds the sulfur reaction, which produces more heat, which vaporizes more bitumen, round and round, feeding itself indefinitely. And here is the detail that should send a chill through you. You cannot extinguish this with water. Water thrown on a burning sulfur-bitumen reaction does not put out the fire. It accelerates it. Water reacts with burning sulfur to produce sulfuric acid, which eats through the stone, while simultaneously releasing hydrogen sulfide. There was no way to stop this, no intervention possible, no escape within the valley. Once ignited, it was over.
When the fire finally burned out, what remained was not just rubble. The land itself had been changed. The sulfur had bonded with the soil, raising the pH levels, altering the mineral composition, creating a chemical environment in which almost nothing can grow. Farmers call this practice salting the earth. It was used in the ancient world as the ultimate act of destruction, not just defeating a city, but ensuring it could never be rebuilt, never farmed, never inhabited again. What happened on the Dead Sea Plain did not need to be done by human hands. The brimstone did it automatically, as a byproduct of its chemistry. The land was chemically sealed, and thousands of years later, that plain still cannot support agriculture. The prophecy of a permanent wasteland was not just fulfilled in words, it was written in chemistry. Here is something worth sitting with for a moment. In the ancient Near East, sulfur was sacred, not feared, sacred. Priests burned it in temples across Mesopotamia, Canaan, and Egypt. It was used in purification rituals, to cleanse sacred spaces, to drive out contamination, to prepare a place for divine presence. Its properties were understood intuitively. It kills bacteria, it repels insects, and in high enough concentration, it is lethal. The same substance that purified the temple could, in sufficient quantity, annihilate a city. And the ancient world knew this. They understood sulfur as a dual-natured element, sacred and deadly in the same breath, which makes the choice of brimstone as the instrument of divine judgment even more deliberate. It was not simply a weapon, it was a cleansing agent, used this time not on a temple, but on a city that had become an abomination. Think about what the people on the ground would have experienced in those moments. Sulfur was the breath of the underworld, the element associated with the deep places, volcanic fissures, sulfur springs, the places where the earth cracked open and breathed something foul and deadly upward. Sulfur was below, always below, and then it fell from the sky. That inversion was not lost on the ancient world. The thing that belongs to the depths descending from the heavens, the underworld ascending, the natural order reversed. For the people of Sodom, for the people of Gomorrah, this was not just destruction. This was a cosmic statement, a declaration written in fire and chemistry that what had been done in those cities had inverted the natural order, and now the natural order was being forcibly restored from above, using the very element that defined everything that was wrong below. The destruction did not happen in secret. The Bible tells us that Abraham, standing far away on higher ground, looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah and saw the smoke rising like smoke from a furnace. He was not alone. The surrounding nations saw it.
Merchants and travelers passing through the region saw it. For weeks, possibly months, that column of smoke was visible across the entire landscape. And when the smoke finally cleared, what replaced it was in some ways worse. Silence, stillness, nothing left. The ruins sat on the plain, visible, permanent, a city still standing in outline, but made entirely of ash. For every generation that passed, for every caravan that rolled by, for every child who asked what that was over there on the plain, the answer was the same. That is what happens. Remember it. In 2026, high-resolution satellite imagery and drone footage captured something remarkable over the Dead Sea Plain. From above, the outlines of the ancient cities are clearly visible, white against the brown desert floor. Geometric shapes, regular angles, building footprints, wall lines. Not erosion patterns, not natural limestone formations, not wind-carved rock. Buildings, flash-heated into ash and preserved by the very process that destroyed them. The scientific consensus among archaeologists and geologists who have examined the site is unambiguous. These are not natural formations. The ash composition, the structural regularity, the thermal signatures within the burn layers, and the presence of those 98% pure sulfur spheres, taken together, these describe a single event: rapid, high energy, targeted. Not a volcano, not an earthquake, not a meteor. Something that has no natural parallel. The choice of brimstone was not random. Every other method of destruction leaves something behind. Fire leaves charcoal, flood leaves sediment, war leaves bones. Brimstone left a molecular seal, a chemical signature embedded in the soil, in the stone, in the ash, that would outlast empires, outlast dynasties, outlast every attempt by time and weather to erase what happened here. 4,000 years later, researchers walk among ash formations that still hold the shape of walls. The sulfur still tests at 98% pure. The burn rings are still visible in the stone. The land is still largely uninhabitable. This was no accident of geology. This was no coincidence of chemistry. This was a targeted, deliberate, irreversible event, designed not merely to destroy, but to endure as a warning. Sodom was not just burned, it was sealed in fire, in chemistry, in the one element on earth that the ancient world understood as both purifier and destroyer. The ultimate weapon, chosen deliberately, executed precisely, and 4,000 years later, it is still doing exactly what it was designed to do. Still warning, still testifying, still here.
Sodom and Gomorrah are not just history. They are a lesson written in fire and chemistry into the face of the earth itself. The New Testament refers to them as an example, set before all generations, as a warning of what divine judgment looks like when corruption reaches its fullest expression. And God did not leave that warning in a book alone. He left it in the soil, in the stone, in the molecular structure of the earth at the precise location where the cities once stood. 98% pure sulfur that no natural process can produce. Burn rings in solid limestone that no conventional fire could create. A land that remains chemically hostile 4,000 years after the event. This is what judgment looks like when it is meant to be permanent. Not a threat, not a story. Evidence, still sitting in the ground, still waiting to be found, still doing exactly what it was designed to do. Warning every generation that passes by, including ours.
If you made it to the end of this video, you already know this content is different. Like it, share it, subscribe. There are people in your life who think faith and science cannot coexist. Send them this. Let the evidence do the talking.